the savanna's hidden language of creatures. Once upon a time, in the heart of the African savanna, there was a wise old elephant named Temba. Temba had lived in the savanna for many years, and he knew every secret of the land. The trees whispered ancient stories, the wind carried the voices of the past, and the creatures spoke to one another in a language only the wise could understand. But this language was hidden. Only those with great wisdom and patience could hear it. Temba had learned this language over many seasons, and now he had a special friend, Quito, the monkey, who was eager to understand the secret language of the land. The young monkey was full of questions and curiosity, always wondering why things happened the way they did. He spent his days watching the animals and listening to the sounds around him, but there was so much he didn't understand. Temba's best friend was a cheeky little monkey called Quito. Quito was known for his playful tricks and endless curiosity. He loved to jump from tree to tree, always asking questions that seemed to have no end. One bright morning, while the sun painted the sky orange and gold, Quito approached Temba with a question. "Temba," he said, "why do the birds sing so early in the morning, and why do the lions roar at dusk?" Quito had noticed these patterns but didn't understand their meaning. Every morning, the birds would start singing just as the sun began to rise, and every evening, the lions would roar as the sun set. It puzzled him, and he turned to Temba, hoping the wise old elephant could explain it to him. Temba chuckled softly, his big ears flapping. "Ah, Quito," he began, "every creature in the savanna speaks its own language, but these languages are not words. They are sounds that carry messages." Quito's eyes widened in wonder. "What do you mean?" he asked. Temba smiled, his wrinkled face softening with the warmth of the setting sun. "The language of the creatures is more than just sound. It's a way of communicating with one another. It's how they share information about the world around them. The birds sing in the morning to greet the sun and welcome the new day, telling everyone it's time to wake up. It's a celebration of the day that is beginning." Quito listened carefully, trying to understand, but still had more questions in his curious mind. Temba led Quito to the baobab tree, the largest tree in the savanna. The tree had stood there for centuries, its roots deep in the earth, its branches reaching for the sky. "The birds," Temba explained, "are singing their songs to tell the morning sun that they are awake. It's their way of greeting the new day, just as you greet the dawn with your playful antics." Quito looked up at the baobab, amazed at its size and strength. He could almost feel the wisdom it held in its branches. The wind rustled through the leaves, as if it were whispering secrets to the world below. Temba continued, "In the same way that you greet your friends with a cheerful hello, the birds greet the world, filling the air with songs of joy." Quito smiled, feeling a little closer to understanding the magic of the savanna. Quito swung from branch to branch, excited to learn. "And the lions?" he asked. Temba smiled, his eyes twinkling. "The lions roar to announce their strength and protect their territory. Their roar echoes through the savanna, warning all creatures to respect their space. It's not just noise, it's a call that carries power and pride." Quito thought about the lions and their mighty roar. He remembered hearing the sound at dusk, when the sky turned purple and gold. It was deep and powerful, like the earth itself was speaking. "So the roar isn't just for scaring others away?" Quito asked. "No," Temba said. "It's a statement of their presence, a declaration that they are the kings of the savanna. When the lions roar, it's like the whole savanna listens, and everyone knows to respect them." As the days passed, Quito became more and more curious about the hidden language of the savanna. He would sit quietly by the river, listening to the croak of frogs, the rustle of grass, and the whisper of the wind. One day, he noticed something amazing. "Temba," he said, "the frogs are croaking in a pattern. It's like they're talking to each other." Temba nodded, his wise eyes glistening with pride. Exactly, Quito. The frogs are communicating with one another. Their croaks tell the others about the rain, about the presence of food, or about danger. Every sound in nature has a meaning, and those who are wise enough to listen can understand them. Quito listened intently, trying to pick out the different sounds the frogs were making. He could hear a rhythm, like a song, and it made him feel connected to the world around him in a new way. Quito wanted to learn more, so Temba took him on a journey across the savannah. They visited the zebras, who communicated through their unique, whistle-like calls. The zebras whistle to warn each other of predators, explained Temba. They are saying, "Stay together, stay safe." Quito watched as the zebras moved in a group, their black and white stripes blending together like a moving pattern. Their calls echoed across the plains, sharp and clear. "It's amazing how they know when danger is near," Quito said, impressed by the zebras' teamwork. Temba nodded. "The animals here rely on each other, Quito. Every sound, every gesture is a part of the dance of life on the savannah. It's all connected, and the creatures are speaking to each other in ways you're just beginning to understand." Next, they met the giraffes, who communicated in a soft, humming sound. The giraffes hum to each other to keep in touch with the herd. It helps them stay close, even in the tall grasses where they can't always see each other, said Temba. Quito looked up at the tall giraffes, amazed at how they seemed to glide gracefully across the savannah. "I can't hear them hum," Quito said, puzzled. "That's because the sound is soft and low, just like the wind," Temba explained. "But if you listen carefully, you'll notice the hum is a way of saying, 'I'm here and I'm safe.' It's a signal that helps the herd stay connected, especially when the grass grows high and the animals can't see each other." Quito smiled, realizing that every animal had its own way of saying, "I'm here." As the sun set, they reached the lions' den. The lions were gathered around, roaring and growling. Quito was nervous at first, but Temba reassured him. "The lions are speaking to each other. Their growls show dominance and strength, and the roar tells the rest of the animals to respect their space." Quito watched as the lions circled each other, their bodies powerful and graceful. The growl was low, vibrating through the earth, and the roar was like a thunderclap in the distance. It wasn't just a noise, it was a message. Quito understood now that the lions were reminding the savannah of their place as the kings of the land. "Do you think they know how powerful they are?" Quito asked. "They do," Temba said, "but they don't roar out of anger. They roar because it's a part of who they are. They are the rulers, and their roar is the voice of the savannah." Quito sat quietly, trying to understand the many languages around him. He heard the sound of a distant drum, a rhythmic beat coming from the village at the edge of the savannah. Temba explained, "Humans have their own language too. They use drums to communicate across long distances, just like the animals use their calls and sounds." Quito was fascinated. "So humans have their own special language too?" he asked. Temba nodded. "Yes, Quito. The drums carry messages of joy, sorrow, and celebration. Just like the birds' songs and the lions' roars, the drums tell stories. They remind us that we are all connected, whether we are animals or humans, and that communication is the bridge between us all." One evening, as the savannah began to cool, Quito sat next to Temba, watching the stars above. "Temba," he said, "I feel like I understand the savannah a little better now. The creatures are all speaking to each other, and even the trees seem to be talking." Temba smiled. "Yes, Quito, the savannah is alive with language. You can hear it in the wind, the rustling of the leaves, the chirping of crickets, and the growl of the lions. The land speaks, but only those who listen with open hearts and minds can truly understand its stories." Quito thought for a moment. "But Temba," he said, "how do we know if we're listening correctly? There are so many different sounds." Temba nodded thoughtfully. The key is patience. The more you listen, the more you understand. Just like learning any language, it takes time. Quito now spent his days observing the world around him. He noticed how the elephants would trumpet their calls to announce their presence, and how the hyenas laughed to signal their approval of a successful hunt. He learned that every creature, no matter how big or small, had a part to play in the symphony of life on the savannah. One day, while sitting by the waterhole, Quito overheard a conversation between two tortoises. They were talking slowly, their voices deep and steady. Quito was fascinated by how they communicated, so he quietly listened to their exchange, trying to decipher the meaning behind their slow, rhythmic words. One afternoon, Quito found a young cheetah cub sitting alone near a tree. The cub looked sad, so Quito approached and asked, "Why are you sitting here all alone?" The cheetah cub sighed and replied, "I'm new to the savannah. I don't know how to speak the language of the other animals." Quito smiled and sat beside the cub. "Don't worry, little one. The savannah is full of languages, and each animal speaks in its own way. You just have to listen with your heart." Quito then explained to the cub how the birds sing, how the lions roar, and how the frogs croak. The cub listened carefully, intrigued by the idea that every sound had a meaning. "But how do I speak their language?" the cub asked. Quito laughed. "You already speak it. You just don't know it yet." Quito began to teach the young cub how to listen to the world around him. He taught him to listen to the rustling leaves in the wind, to the hum of the giraffes, and to the buzzing of the bees. The cub started to understand the different sounds and what they meant. He learned that the sound of the wind meant change was coming, and the chirping of the crickets meant the night was near. Slowly but surely, the cub began to understand the language of the savannah, just as Quito had. As the cub grew stronger and more confident, he felt a deep connection to the land. As days turned into weeks, the cheetah cub began to understand the language of the savannah. It wasn't about words. It was about listening to the rhythms of nature and learning how to be a part of it. Quito was proud to see the cub grow, and Temba nodded in approval. "You see, Quito," Temba said one morning, "the savannah speaks to all of us in its own way. It has always spoken, but now the cub has learned to hear it. The language of the land is ancient, and those who are patient enough to listen will always understand." The more Quito learned, the more he realized how connected everything in the savannah was. From the tiniest ant to the tallest giraffe, every creature played its part in the grand orchestra of life. Every sound, every gesture was a message. The savannah was alive with stories waiting to be heard. Quito was amazed by the interconnectedness of all things. He began to notice how the zebras would move in sync, how the wildebeests would communicate silently through body language, and how even the smallest insects had their own way of speaking. One evening, as Quito and Temba sat beneath the baobab tree, Quito said, "I've learned so much about the language of the creatures, but there's still so much to discover." Temba chuckled. "Indeed, Quito. The language of the savannah is vast, and we learn something new every day. It's a language that connects us all, and the more we listen, the more we understand." Quito smiled, feeling a sense of wonder at the endless mysteries the savannah held. "I can't wait to learn more," he said eagerly. Temba's eyes twinkled. "Patience, Quito. You will learn when the time is right." And so, Quito continued his journey of discovery, sharing the wisdom of the savannah with others. He taught the younger animals how to listen to the wind, how to hear the song of the birds, and how to understand the growl of the lion. Quito knew that the savannah's language was a gift, and it was one that should be shared with the world. As he shared the stories of the savannah with his friends, he could see the joy and understanding spreading through the land. It was as though the creatures had begun to speak with one voice, united by their shared understanding of the land's language. As the years passed, Quito became known as the wise monkey who understood the hidden language of the creatures. He lived a long life, surrounded by friends who knew the value of listening, and the savannah thrived with the knowledge passed down through the generations. The creatures now worked together more harmoniously, and the land was filled with peace. Quito would often sit beneath the baobab tree, watching the sun set over the savannah, knowing that the language of the land would continue to be shared for generations to come. And so, the hidden language of the creatures remained alive in the hearts of all who called the savannah home. It was a language of connection, of understanding, and of respect. A language that would continue to echo through the savannah for generations to come. The animals had learned to speak not just with their voices, but with their actions, their movements, and their hearts. The savannah's story was not just one of survival. It was a story of cooperation, of listening, and of living in harmony with the world around them. The wise old elephant, Temba, watched as Quito shared the lessons of the savannah. "It is good to see that the language of the creatures is being passed on," he said with a proud smile. "For it is through understanding each other that we truly live in harmony." Quito looked up at Temba with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you, Temba. You opened my ears to the stories the wind tells, the trees whisper, and the animals speak." Temba nodded thoughtfully. "It is not just about hearing the sounds, Quito. It's about understanding their meaning. You've learned that, and now it's your turn to teach others." Quito sat with the younger animals, teaching them the same lessons Temba had taught him. He taught them to listen for the warning calls of the zebras, to understand the gentle hum of the giraffes, and to recognize the deep rumble of the elephants' trumpets. As the younger creatures began to understand the language of the savannah, they grew stronger and more connected to one another. They helped each other find food, warn of danger, and navigate the vast plains. The language of the savannah brought them together, creating a bond that united them all, regardless of their size or species. One day, a heavy rainstorm swept across the savannah, and all the animals hurried to find shelter. The wind howled through the trees, and the sky darkened with thick clouds. As the storm raged on, Quito found himself standing next to a young buffalo who was frightened by the storm. "Quito, what should we do?" the buffalo asked, his voice trembling. Quito smiled reassuringly. "The storm will pass, my friend. Just listen to the sound of the rain. It's a rhythm, a beat of nature. And after the storm, the savannah will be calm again, just like it always is." The storm passed, and the animals emerged from their shelters. The sky cleared, and a rainbow appeared over the savannah. Quito and the young buffalo stood together, watching the beauty of the world around them. "The savannah speaks even in the storm," Quito said. "Every sound, every drop of rain is part of the language that connects us all. Even in the chaos, there is harmony." The buffalo smiled, his fear forgotten. "Thank you, Quito. You've taught me to listen in a way I never knew how." As the seasons changed, the creatures of the savannah continued to speak their unique languages. The lions roared with pride, the elephants trumpeted their greetings, and the birds sang their songs of hope. Quito sat with Temba beneath the baobab tree, reflecting on all that he had learned. "Temba," Quito said, "I've come to realize that the language of the savannah is not just about communication. It's about understanding the world and each other. It's about finding our place in the circle of life." Temba nodded, his great trunk resting on the ground. "Yes, Quito. The language of the savannah is about connection. It's about recognizing that each creature, from the tiniest ant to the mighty elephant, has a role to play. When we listen to the land and to each other, we find harmony. And that is what keeps the savannah alive." Quito smiled, grateful for the wisdom Temba had shared with him. He understood now that the language of the savannah was not just about sounds. It was about the way all living things work together. One day, Quito met a young gazelle who had just arrived in the savannah. The gazelle was nervous and unsure, unfamiliar with the ways of the land. "I don't know how to speak the language of the creatures here," the gazelle said, her voice trembling. Quito chuckled gently and sat next to her. "You already know how, little one. The language of the savannah is not just about sound. It's about feeling the rhythm of the earth beneath your feet, the wind on your face, and the sun on your back. You're already speaking it." The gazelle looked at Quito with wide eyes, unsure. "But how do I listen?" she asked. Quito smiled. "You listen with your heart, just as I did. The more you listen, the more you will understand." Quito spent the next few days teaching the young gazelle how to observe the savannah. They sat by the river, watching the crocodiles bask in the sun, and listened to the gentle buzz of the bees, collecting nectar. "See, the bees are working together," Quito said. "Their humming is a message of cooperation. They help each other gather food, and in return, they keep the savannah blooming." The gazelle watched carefully, realizing that the animals were always in tune with each other. "I'm beginning to understand," she said softly. "It's not just about what we say. It's about what we do." The gazelle soon began to speak the language of the savannah herself. She learned to listen to the wind, the way the animals moved, and the silent messages of the trees. She found her place in the great circle of life, where she was no longer an outsider but an important part of the savannah's story. Quito watched proudly as the gazelle joined the herd, running freely across the plains with the other creatures. He knew that the savannah's language had passed from one generation to the next, and it would continue to live on forever. As Quito grew older, he became a respected elder of the savannah, known far and wide for his wisdom. He sat with Temba, watching the younger animals learn the lessons of the land. "The future of the savannah is in good hands," Temba said, his voice filled with pride. "You've passed on the knowledge, Quito, and now the next generation is ready to carry the language forward." Quito nodded. "It's not just about teaching them to listen. It's about teaching them to live in harmony with the world around them." The animals of the savannah had learned the most important lesson of all, to listen. They understood that communication wasn't just about words, it was about understanding the rhythms of life and living in harmony with the land. Every sound, every gesture, every movement was part of the great story of the savannah. It was a story that would continue for generations to come. One day, Quito sat beneath the baobab tree, his fur graying with age. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden light over the savannah. He closed his eyes and listened to the sounds around him, the rustle of the grass, the distant roar of the lions, the soft hum of the giraffes. He felt at peace. He knew that the savannah was alive with language, and that it would continue to speak for as long as the land remained. Temba sat beside Quito, his great trunk resting on the ground. "You've done well, Quito," Temba said. "You've given the savannah a gift, one that will live forever. The creatures of the land will continue to listen, and they will continue to understand." Quito smiled, feeling the weight of Temba's words. "I've learned so much, Temba, but there's still so much more to hear, to understand, and to share." Temba nodded. "And that is the beauty of the language of the savannah. It never ends. There is always more to learn, more to discover." As the years passed, Quito's teachings continued to echo through the savannah. The younger animals carried on the wisdom he had shared, and the language of the creatures remained strong. The animals understood that the savannah was more than just a place to live. It was a place to listen, to connect, and to grow. It was a place where every sound had a purpose, and every creature had a role to play. The stories of the savannah, passed down through the generations, lived on in the hearts of all who called the land home. The language of the creatures, with its songs, roars, and hums, was a testament to the beauty of nature and the deep connection between all living things. Quito knew that his work was not finished, for the language of the savannah would continue, to grow, to change, and to speak to those who were willing to listen. As time passed, Quito felt a deep sense of fulfillment knowing that the language of the creatures would live on through the generations. Every creature in the savannah was part of something bigger, and each one played a vital role. The winds whispered the stories of old, the trees swayed with the knowledge of the ages, and the animals continued to speak their truths. Quito, now much older, watched as the younger animals began to teach their own. It was a beautiful cycle, one that Temba had once spoken of, and Quito knew that this cycle would never end. The wisdom of the savannah would be passed on forever, like the river that flowed endlessly through the land. One day, as Quito sat near the riverbank watching the sun dip below the horizon, he heard the sound of soft footsteps behind him. He turned to see a young lioness walking towards him. Her golden fur shimmered in the fading light, and her eyes were filled with curiosity. "Quito," she said, "I've been listening to the sounds of the savannah, and I feel there's so much more to understand. Can you teach me more about the language of the creatures?" Quito smiled warmly at the young lioness. "Of course, my dear," he said. "The language of the savannah is always waiting to be discovered. It's not just about hearing the sounds, it's about feeling them. The land speaks to us, and we must be open to receiving its messages." The young lioness, whose name was Zara, sat next to Quito and listened intently. Over the next few weeks, Quito taught Zara the language of the savannah. They spent hours together, observing the animals, listening to the wind, and learning from the trees. Zara learned that the rustling of the leaves in the trees could tell them if a storm was coming. She learned that the scent of the grass could reveal where the herds were grazing. Slowly but surely, Zara began to understand the savannah's hidden messages. She felt a deep connection to the land, just as Quito had all those years ago. One evening, as Zara sat beneath the baobab tree, she looked up at Quito with a thoughtful expression. "Quito," she said, "I've learned so much from you, but there's one thing I don't understand. Why does the savannah speak to us in so many different ways? Why not just use words?" Quito smiled gently. "Ah, Zara, that's the beauty of it. The savannah doesn't need words. Words are limited. They can only say so much. But the savannah speaks through all of nature, through the sounds, the movements, the very essence of life. When you listen to the wind, or the birds, or the roar of the lions, you hear more than words. You hear stories. You hear life itself. The savannah doesn't need words because it speaks in a language that everyone can understand, if they take the time to listen." Zara thought about this for a long time. The next morning, as the sun rose, she sat with the giraffes, watching them gently sway in the breeze. She listened to their soft humming sounds and felt a deep sense of peace. She realized that Quito was right. The savannah spoke in ways that words could never fully express. The language of the savannah was one of connection, of understanding, and of living in harmony with the world around them. Zara smiled to herself, knowing that she had found her place in this grand story. As the seasons changed, Quito continued to teach the younger animals, just as Temba had taught him. He passed on the lessons of the savannah, teaching them how to listen to the wind, how to understand the songs of the birds, and how to recognize the messages in the sounds of the earth. The young ones grew wiser, more connected to the world around them, and they began to teach the next generation. It was a beautiful cycle of learning and sharing, a cycle that would continue for as long as the savannah remained. One day, Quito sat beneath the baobab tree, watching the stars twinkle above. He felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that the language of the creatures would never be forgotten. The sounds of the savannah would continue to echo through the land, and the stories would be passed down from one generation to the next. He closed his eyes, listening to the soft hum of the night, and smiled. The savannah was alive, its language vibrant and strong, and he knew that he had played a part in ensuring that this language would live on forever. As Quito grew older, he spent more time reflecting on the lessons he had learned. He realized that the language of the savannah was not just about the sounds. It was about the way of life. It was about living in harmony with the world, respecting the land, and understanding the creatures around you. He had learned that every sound, every gesture, every movement had meaning, and he had shared that knowledge with others so that they could understand the true beauty of the savannah. One morning, as Quito was walking along the riverbank, he saw a young lion and a young gazelle standing side by side, listening to the river. The lion was no longer a predator, and the gazelle was no longer prey. They had learned to live together in peace, understanding the language of the land that connected them. Quito smiled as he watched them. The savannah speaks, he thought, and it speaks to all who are willing to listen. Quito's heart swelled with pride as he watched the next generation of creatures listening to the stories of the savannah. He knew that they would carry these stories with them, passing them on to their own children. And so, the language of the savannah would continue to echo through the land, a never-ending story of connection, understanding, and respect. Years passed, and Quito became a legend in the savannah. His name was spoken with reverence by all the creatures, for he had been the one to teach them how to listen to the world around them. The language of the creatures was no longer hidden. It was a language that everyone could understand, and it had brought the animals together in ways that were once thought impossible. And so, the savannah thrived, with all its creatures living in harmony, communicating with one another through the language of the land. The lions roared their strength, the elephants trumpeted their greetings, and the birds sang their songs of hope. The animals understood that they were all part of something greater, something that connected them all. Quito, now old and wise, sat beneath the baobab tree one last time, watching the sun set over the savannah. He had taught all he could, and the savannah was in good hands. The animals had learned to listen to the world, and they had learned to live in peace with one another. Quito closed his eyes, feeling the cool breeze on his fur, and smiled. The savannah will continue to speak, he thought, and those who listen will hear its stories. And so Quito passed away, his spirit forever a part of the savannah. His teachings lived on, carried by the wind, the trees, and the animals who understood the language of the land. The story of Quito, the wise monkey who understood the hidden language of the creatures, was passed down through the generations. And in the hearts of all who lived on the savannah, the language of the creatures would continue to live forever. The savannah remained a place of harmony, where every creature, no matter how big or small, had a voice. The winds whispered their stories, the trees swayed with the knowledge of the ages, and the animals spoke in their own way. And as long as the savannah stood, its language would never fade, for it was a language of life, of connection, and of love, a language that would always be understood by those who truly listened.